So this past recruiting cycle, I applied to more than 200 plus finance internships. And as you may know, finance internships, they're pretty competitive, especially in sectors like investment banking, private equity, venture capital, etc. They're pretty competitive because the only way to break into these industries is usually through internships. So these positions get hundreds to thousands applications. And for myself as a non-business, non-economic student, I attempted to apply to as many finance internships as I can to get a shot into breaking into the industries of consulting, product management, or any finance role that doesn't have to do with heavy accounting or auditing. Because this past summer I worked as an auditor at PwC and it just wasn't for me. So that really motivated me to break into a different industry within finance. And a bit of a background on myself, I'm currently a student at UC Berkeley. So this internship that I already landed will be for the summer of my junior year. And with that, let's get into the video of how many times I got rejected and the very few internship offers that I got. So this current recruiting cycle is probably one of the worst in a long time because of the current economic conditions right now. The amount of internships that companies have right now drastically decreased from past years. And this made the recruiting process even more hard because I had interviews at Amazon and Salesforce, but I had my interviews pulled because of economic conditions from what my recruiters told me. And my recruiting journey can be broken up into 3 different phases. First phase is what I consider the preseason of my recruiting cycle. During this period of August and September, I applied to maybe 10 internships per day, consistently just stalking LinkedIn and Handshake to see new finance internships that popped up. And with the speed of how many internships I was applying to, I was getting just as many rejections as well. And this felt terrible. At times I felt like maybe I wouldn't get an internship and I would have to go back to audit. But I knew I just had to be persistent, so I just kept on applying to more internship. And I applied to any finance internship. I even applied to L'Oreal and Victoria's Secret's finance internships, which maybe I would have worked there if I got in the role, or maybe not, who knows. But I still applied to as many places that I could. And with time, I got a few interviews. And even though they were with lower end companies, I still used the experience of those interviews to practice to make sure that when I got the chance of interviewing at a big company, that I would seize the chance and I had a lot of practice under my belt. So at the end of the phase, even though I got a ton of rejections, I ended up actually with one internship offer under a consulting role, but it's still had components of audit as well, which made me not really interested in the role, but I was so glad that I got an internship because an offer is better than no offer. So the second phase of my recruiting process, in which I consider the regular season, I started getting a lot more tractions with all the applications I was putting through, and there were days where I spent about 4 hours just interviewing with companies, and it was really tiring. On top of that, I continued to apply to as many places that I could. And at the end of this phase, I ended up getting another internship offer. This was with a consulting company, but it was located in San Diego, which honestly San Diego is really nice, but I know I wanted to stay in Los Angeles or San Francisco for the summer. So I continued to stay persistent, stay hopeful that, big companies would reach out. And towards the end of October, when I started to panic, honestly, that, this recruiting cycle was just terrible. Maybe it was just the economic conditions. Maybe my resume just sucked. Big companies started to reach out like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Disney, Uber. So a lot of good companies started reaching out. And this is where phase 2 switched to phase 3, in which I considered playoffs / the Super Bowl for my recruiting process. I knew all the interviews that I had already done with lower end companies was for this moment. And I definitely felt the pressure at this time because I knew it was all or nothing, because I wasn't guaranteed more interviews with top companies, so I really knew I had to nail down these interviews. So I reallocated my time from applying to internships to interview prepping for these top companies. However, meanwhile, when I was preparing for these interviews, my other internships were expiring, so I had to let the recruiter know if I was going to accept the offer or deny it. And for the consulting offer that had no audit components, I accepted that offer knowing that I could possibly reject that offer later on. That's a tactic that a lot of people use. If you don't have a backup, it's good to just take that. Meanwhile, you're still recruiting, just to have some assurance in the recruiting process that you will have an internship for the summer. And you shouldn't feel bad about it. You don't owe these recruiters or these companies anything, but still be communicative with your recruiter to let them know that if you got an offer from a better company, that you're no longer going to be considering their offer and you're going to be going elsewhere with your career. Because at the end of the day, you should prioritize yourself and your career first over these companies, because at a moment's notice, these companies could just lay you off without any remorse. So the big interviews that I prepared for, I made sure I did my research on the companies, and I made sure I went through my behaviorals with friends to prepare for my interviews. When I finally made it to the super days for these companies, the timeline just lined up for all these companies in which I was either interviewing with all of them on one day or the next day. So it really did feel like a Super Bowl, in which it felt like it was all or nothing with these 2 days. And I would be lying to you if I didn't feel like I was nervous. I definitely felt a lot of pressure that if I failed these interviews, that, I was just going to be a failure and not make that step of getting a good internship for my junior year. But all the preparation that I had already done with the past interviews made my interviews interviews with these top companies feel like a walkthrough and something that I've already been through. And the internships that I was mainly considering was the JP Morgan one and the Uber one, because they were both internal consulting, and that was something that I wanted to do. So once I finished interviewing with these companies, I thought my best one was Disney, and I thought I gave solid interviews for the rest of them. And now it just turned into a waiting game of getting the response back from these companies. And the first one that responded to me was Disney, and I got denied. Even though I felt like I gave my best interview, I got denied because they only had one spot open, and I guess someone just interviewed better than me. And then the next one was Goldman Sachs, in which I got the offer, but it was in a position that I really didn't want to do. It was wealth management. And even though Goldman Sachs is a great name, I knew that I would rather do consulting rather than wealth management. So I waited for JPM and Uber to make a decision. JPM contacted me next. They called me when I was in class actually, and I felt like something was important with this unknown call. So I answered it, and it was a recruiter letting me know that they're extending an offer. And I was pretty hyped because this was with consulting and this was in New York as well. So I was super pumped for that, but I knew Uber was a company that I wanted to work for. So I waited for that one, and I didn't get a response till a week later during Thanksgiving break. It was a random number that called me, and usually I don't pick up unknown callers, nor do I pick up my phone at all. But I was just laying in bed. I saw my phone ring and I answered it. It was the Uber recruiter letting me know that they were gonna extend an offer. So I was super hyped about that, super stoked. Uber was a company that I really wanted to work for. So I accepted the offer on the phone because I knew I was done with recruiting, all the applications, all the interview prep. I just wanted to be over with it. And that placed a wrap on my recruiting cycle, or did it? Who knows? I'm still getting rejections to the day, so never know. So after a long recruiting cycle, I was glad that I was able to get an internship at Uber. The recruiting journey is definitely just a numbers game. Yeah, there's ways to amplify your success to get more interviews, but at the end of the day, it's honestly a lottery, and you don't know which company is going to interview you or not. But then again, there was a lot of mistakes that I did during my process, and a lot of things that I learned as well that I would have changed to improve my recruiting process. But with that, I hope you guys got some value out of the video, and if you have a question, you could comment it down below. It's definitely tough recruiting during these economic conditions, and especially in finance in general, it's super competitive. But with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.